All right, glad you are here, guys. So we're going to delve into Zigaboo Modeliste here. So he was the drummer with the Meters. So these guys came from New Orleans. They were in the sort of mid-60s. They really came about. They didn't get massive commercial success, but now looking back, they're really considered to be one of the most influential funk bands right at the beginning of the movement, along with James Brown. These guys are considered to be a huge part of how funk developed. And as a drumming style, Zigaboo was really kind of creating the mold. He had this amazing style and it was so broken, you know, he didn't always use those eighth note hi-hats that we like to underpin everything with. Quite often that was very broken. For example, Cissy Strut, which we'll look at here, is really messed up, and it makes it kind of tricky to learn, but it's just what makes it such an amazing groove, and that's why it's been copied so many times and why we're going to look at it here. So they had that kind of greasy, sometimes called that greasy New Orleans swing thing. Sometimes not quite, do you know, like playing in the gaps. It's not quite straight. It's not all the way swung like full on triplets. It's somewhere in the middle. The best way to really get your head around that is to go and listen, and you'll just soak it up and start to really feel it. It's such an awesome style. It's so funky, and it's kind of, they really created the blueprint for a lot of what we consider to be the staple of funk now. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so the first Zigaboo groove I want to look at is the incredible Cissy Strut. And you must know this groove. You must know it. And if you don't, God, man, you got to go and check this out. This song is so cool, and the groove is so cool. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. And, you know, Zigaboo is just awesome anyway, the way he approaches grooves. And we're going to look at that here, obviously. But Cissy Strut's the one. If you know one groove, it's going to be this, or one song from the Meters, it's this. And we talked about that feel, that kind of New Orleans greasy feel. So the feel is such a big part of this song. Don't worry too much at the beginning. Just learn the mechanics, learn the placement of the notes. But once you've got this down, really listen to the original. Try and play along with it once you get up to that speed, because you need that feel to come through in this as well. That kind of swinging, slightly swinging, but not completely swung vibe. Now, I want to look at section, I've broken it down section A and section B. I want to look at section A here. And there's two bars that I've written out. We're just going to look at bar one. And first of all, it's more about the count, because you can see we haven't got those nice slight eighth note hi-hats to lock everything neatly onto. Zigaboo's too funky to do that. And he's another one of those great funk drummers with a really funky name as well. I think that helps me. My name's Matt, so it's not very funky. So I try my best, but if your name's Zigaboo, I think you're halfway there. So, no like straight eighth note hi-hat pattern. So the count for this bar goes 1, 2, a 3 and a 4, and bar one again. 1, 2, a 3 and a 4, and 1, 2, a 3 and a 4, and 1, 2, a 3 and a 4, and that's the count for the rhythm. And we can see it's bass and hi-hat first, then snare, then it goes hat, bass, snare, snare. And you know, like, so you got the guitar thing. So often, like, sorry, every bar you've got that ba ba. It's always that 4 and. It's a real kind of signature of the rhythm of this song. So that's why it ends on that bar with the snare, snare. So let's go slow, so you don't have to listen to me singing it anymore. I'm going to take it to the drum kit. We'll go super slow and just spend as long as you need. Come back, rewatch this demonstration of this little beat, and take whatever it takes to get there. Just take your time with it. All right, so for the second bar of section A, I'm going to split it down. It's in 4/4, so we've got 4 beats in the bar. We're going to break it down and do 1 beat at a time. Just 'cause it's quite a complex groove, there's quite a lot going on. The more we break this down, the simpler it is just to wrap our heads around it. So beat 1 goes bass, hat, bass. That's it. Boom, ta, ta, boom. And if we can give it a bit of that kind of swung, boom, ta, ta, boom. Boom, ta, ta, boom. All right, so for beat 2, it's all the 16th notes again. It goes snare, bass, hat, hat. And the hat, you can see the first one's got a bracket. So if so it's a softer hi-hat followed by a louder hi-hat. Not like the most important thing of this groove, but you'll hear some of those hi-hats are louder than others. So that can really kind of bring this to life a little bit more to get those nuances. As with a lot of these funk grooves we're looking at, they vary throughout the song. So this is just taking a snippet as an example of one thing. So don't stress too much, and it's not like you want to play the exact same bar every time, because that wouldn't sound like Zigaboo. He mixes it up, he improvises, he flows, and just plays what he feels through this song. But let's try and get that now anyway, because it's good practice. So we're going to go snare, bass, quiet hi-hat, loud hi-hat. All right, so for beat 2, it's all the 16th notes again. It goes snare, bass, hat, hat. And the hat, you can see the first one's got a bracket. So if so it's a softer hi-hat followed by a louder hi-hat. Not like the most important thing of this groove, but you'll hear some of those hi-hats are louder than others. So that can really kind of bring this to life a little bit more to get those nuances. As with a lot of these funk grooves we're looking at, they vary throughout the song. So this is just taking a snippet as an example of one thing. So don't stress too much, and it's not like you want to play the exact same bar every time, because that wouldn't sound like Zigaboo. He mixes it up, he improvises, he flows, and just plays what he feels through this song. But let's try and get that now anyway, because it's good practice. So we're going to go snare, bass, quiet hi-hat, loud hi-hat. Okay, so for the next one, we're going to go bass, bass. So it's 3E, and you'll see that E's got a hi-hat with it. And then another hi-hat after it, so it goes boom, ba, ba, boom, ba, ba. So they kind of overlap. There's 2 bass drums, 2 hi-hats, and the second of those bass drums falls with the first of the hi-hats. You can see it on the sheet music if that explanation's a bit confusing. This is a tricky little thing to do though. It's that layering it up, overlapping those rhythms is hard. And then you've got a bass on the end. So it's 3, E, and R. 3, E, and R. 3, E, and R. On the drum kit. Okay, for the last part of this, it does that 4 and that we talked about. Every bar does it. But he's going to put a bass in between us. It goes 4 E and 4 E and then with the and on 4 there's a hi-hat as well. So you just got a hi-hat in there with the snare. Let's check that out. All right, so now we've learned each individual section of this second bar. Let's try the whole thing together. I wouldn't even attempt this until you're comfortable with each beat, each quarter note section of the bar. But of course with this you can you can press pause on the video, you can rewind it, you can do it all at your own pace. So I'm going to assume you're good for this, but just take your time with that, slowly bring it up, and then we're going to try the whole thing together. So the count for this simply goes 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and. That's the count for it. But obviously putting all those limbs together is not easy. Let's check it out slowly on the drum kit. Okay, so now we need to put both those bars together. And again, obviously don't even attempt this until you've gone up through that process, worked everything up slowly and gradually and you're comfortable with it. But we're going to do it. And what we'll find here is that first bar is very broken. And the second bar suddenly flies into those 16th notes, so it moves nicely there. But, as I've mentioned, this is very improvised. Zigaboo would have just changed it. There's no 2 bars would be exactly the same. So just take the essence of this, gradually bring it up. And then the idea is we could just groove with the song, and we add some of our own variations in there, but it's based upon what we've studied from Zigaboo. So let me just count this to you, because the count's really interesting for these 2 bars together. So go 1, 2, a 3 and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and. So do you see how it's like that broken rhythm in bar 1? And it kind of seems to just speed up a bit because it's all of those 16th notes in bar 2. So this is not an easy groove, but it's so worth it. So I'm going to go to the kit now and play those 2 bars together. And, you know, you just have to, like I keep saying, just bring it up slowly, work it in sections, and just gradually get the essence of Zigaboo into your playing. All right, so now we're going to go to the second part of Cissy Strut. So there's the kind of A section, then the B section. So that's section A. Section B is bum ba da dum bum bum ba ba dum ba ba da boom ba ba. And again, Zigaboo stresses the 4 and the 4 and, but instead of it being the snare, here he does it with an open hi-hat. So we're just going to look at bar 1 in its entirety. You will notice there's no hi-hats in this at all until the very end of that 4 and. So just basses and snares. So let me just tap the rhythm out to you, then we'll do it on the kit. So this is bar 1 of section B. 1, a 2, e and a 3, e and a 4. And again, 1, e and a 2, e and a 3, e and a 4. And 1, e and a 2, e and a 3, e and a 4. And so you've got that 16th note rest on beat 3. Watch out for that. Now that's it, right? But it's quite an interesting rhythm. The spacing's really interesting, but there's no, like without that 8th note hi-hat to just keep you in place, it can be tricky to maintain that timing. Check it out slowly on the drum kit. Okay, so now let's look at bar 2 and we'll do the exact same thing. I'll play the whole bar. I'm going to count it to you first. It's got the bat, bat of 4 and 4 and again. So let's just try this slow. So we go 1 and a 2, e and a 3, e and a 4 and. So things of note. Beat 2, 16th note rest. So beat 2 goes 2, e and a. That's weird. And then beat 3, it does a bit more of that kind of overlapping thing. So you go snare, snare. But that second snare has a bass with it. That feels awkward. That'll catch you out. So the whole count again. 1 and a 2, e and a 3, e and a 4 and. All right, cool. So now let's try both of those together. I'll just count it for you first, like beating my body up again, and then we'll do it on the drum kit. So we go. So this is section B, both bars together slowly. 1 e and a 2 e and a 3 e and a 4 and 1 e and a 2 e and a 3 e and a 4 and. I'll do that slower. 1 e and a 2 e and a 3 e and a 4 and 1 e and a 2 e and a 3 e and a 4 and. All right, cool. So you've heard it slow. Sounds awesome, but you can see it's quite complicated, not like a natural pattern. So let's now, I'm going to play it to you at full speed so you can really kind of hear how it should be sounding. All right, now I always say, we've done Cissy Strut, and I always say, if you're going to be a sissy, you might as well be a sophisticated sissy. And that's what we're going to look at now. So this groove is a 16th note hi-hat pattern. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... Now, this is at 72 BPM. So let me just get you some 72 BPM so we can hear what that sounds like. One E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3. You know, so that's pretty quick. And if you're doing that with one hand, you're going to really want to use that nice loose technique there. Use the fingers, use a nice loose fulcrum. Don't use the arms because that will just sound rigid and too heavy-handed and it will just be really tiring really quickly. So get it nice and loose. So let's just try those hands together. Hi-hat and snare, but no open hi-hats at this stage, just so you can kind of get a feel for how that's going to work. Okay, so now we've got the hand pattern. Let's just add the open hi-hat. So it's on the ah of 2 and the ah of 4. So 1E and a 2E and ah, 3E and a 4E and ah. Gives it a really nice kind of syncopated lift on the last 16th note of beat 2 and 4. Check it out. All right, finally, let's bring the bass drums into that pattern. So they're going to go 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and. So when you're doing these, make sure they really lock in. It's a tricky pattern, so we don't want a flam between the bass and the hi-hat. They need to be really locked in to make this groove and sound like a sophisticated sissy, as Zigaboo intended. All right, so now we're going to break down a song I absolutely love. More or less, it's an instrumental. So, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but Look a Pi Pi, Look a Pee Pee. I think it's Pi Pi. Anyway, I know I've probably made a mess of that, but you can see how it's spelled. And what's important to me is not how I pronounce the name, but it's the groove. It's the groove. It's what it's all about here. So, just looking at that sheet music, it's another flowing 16th note feel. It's got another, it's very much a meter song. It's got a bit of that kind of Cissy Strut kind of vibe to it. What I want to do here is break it down one beat at a time. So one quarter note at a time, just because it is quite complex. So let's look at beat 1. So we've got more or less through this whole bar, a nice solid 8th note hi-hat pattern. So it's not like that beginning of Cissy Strut where it's all broken. We do have that 1 and 2 and running through this bar, right? Running through most of the main groove. So bar 1's going to go 1 E and ah. So it's bass and hat, snare, hat, bass. 1 E and ah. Okay, so now for the second beat, for beat 2 of the bar, it's 16th notes again. So we go 2 E and ah, and what we're going to do there is play snare and hi-hat, bass, then the hi-hat, then a snare. Now on its own this isn't that difficult, but that snare is going to lead nicely into beat 3. But just for now, we'll just do beat 2, 2 E and ah. Okay, so beat 3 is quite simple. It just goes 3 and snare, bass and open hi-hat. So just like I kind of mentioned a moment ago, the last snare of beat 2 on the ah leads into beat 3. So we've got 2 snares in a row. So we're breaking them up to learn them here, but be mindful they're going to come together later. But for now, 3 and. And so beat 4, we go 4E and. So there's the hi-hat, which is closing from the previous open hi-hat. So that's why there's a plus sign there. But for the purposes of just learning this beat, it's a closed hi-hat. So you go 4E and. So we've got a display snare drum on the 4 and there, which just sounds cool. It's such a funk thing to do, to displace a snare. So we've moved it. Instead of the expected beat 4, we put it on the 4 and. 4E and. All right, so let's try this slowly. So as with these beats, you know, don't attempt the whole thing until you can play each individual part quite well. You're already, you know, you're pretty solid with that. Only then should you put it all together. But let's just assume you've got to that stage already. Let's try this. So let me just count it to you first. So we go 1 E and 2 E and 3 and 4 E and. And it's that 3 that becomes slightly challenging at faster speeds. But let's just try it super slow on the kit. Okay, cool. So now let's try it at full speed. And like always, I just have to always say this. Gradually, this is a very gradual learning process. So learn each beat individually. Then eventually you can try the whole thing slowly. And then later down the line when you're good at it, then you bring it up to full speed, right? And as I mentioned already, particularly look out for that 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. A 3, the 2 snare drums. That's kind of a tricky bit if you're not careful. Work in the left hand there. But let's have a listen. Lastly, we're going to look at Dry Spell from 1969. So this groove, essentially, it's just 2 beats repeated. It's cool. This has got a bit of a Led Zeppelin feel to me, like a bit of an immigrant song thing. Boom, boom. So, you know, boom, 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 boom. You know, if you're a bit of a Zepp fan, you'll know what I'm talking about. Right, this has got a bit of that vibe going on. So this is at 74. So the count, here we go. 1 and a 2 E, a 3 and a 4 E, a 1 and a 2 E and a 3 and a. So that's kind of how we're feeling this. But I just want to break it down. I'm going to look at beat 1 and beat 2, and then we'll try it together, and then it just repeats that, right? So beat 1, it's 8th note hi-hats all the way. So we've got those, it's not broken. Again, it's not broken like the likes of Cissy Strut. So we're going to go 1 and a. So the bass drum's going 1 and a, hi-hat 1 and. So we go 1 and a. Okay, and then beat 2, we're going to start with a snare and hi-hat. We go 2 E and a, 2 E and a. So snare and hat, bass, bass. Okay, so let's try those 2 beats together, and then if we repeat those 2 beats, we get the bar, because that's what it does, it repeats it. So let me just tap it slowly so you can kind of get the count, then we'll do it on the kit. So we're going to go 1 and a, 2 E and a, 3 and a, 4 E and a, 1 and a, 2 E and a, 3 and a, 4 E and a. And you know, like this tapping out thing, I'm partly doing it so I can talk to you and count the rhythm so you can hear it first. But I work out half my beats like this, and I don't know if you do that as well, but I quite often find the noise of the drum kit and the temptation to just go crazy is actually a distraction. So I work a lot of stuff out away from the kit, which is why I've like permanently got a handprint bruise on my chest. But that's, you know, and it might be just on the table, that annoying habit we've all got, haven't we? Like since we were in school, playing with pencils on the table, you know. But sometimes just tapping out and really counting it and just feeling it in that way is for me a simple way to do it. But let's check it out now on the drum kit. Okay, so now let's try it at full speed. So as I say, 74 BPM. So it's going to go 1 and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a boom, 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 ba boom, 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 ba boom. You know, so it's quite a full-on speed. As always, you bring it up gradually. Bit of a workout for the right foot, and you want the whole thing to just flow nicely, lock in, and sound awesome. Have a listen. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed that, breaking down some of Zigaboo's grooves. Some of those are pretty complicated, so don't worry if you don't nail them at first. That's fine. Or if they're slow and you can't play them at speed, that's fine. Keep working on them and you'll eventually bring them up to speed. But I think maybe even more importantly than that, it's just been soaked in, right? So at some point, those influences are going to show up in some way, shape or form in your playing by studying these really, really important drummers in the funk genre. It's just going in, it's going into the mixing pot, and it's going to come out later in your playing. So don't stress if you're not there yet. Obviously, go and listen to the original stuff. Go and listen to the meters, go and check out these songs, because that's where you're really going to get inside the feel of it and understand how it works in the musical context. Very, very important. All right, so that's the end of Zigaboo. I'll see you on the next one.